Arduino is basically for
yes, sir.
this line following robot. So like photoresistors
And probably pretty
and like a circuit board and like a really precision IC.
Yeah.
So just get some wheels, get some levers. The photoresistors on the front.
Really?
Line following robot.
Wouldn't have expected that. How does that work?
It's pretty hard.
It's what's called a barrier receiver. Which is like a built like underneath the layer, so it's like totally isolated from the environment and all that.
About that. So it somehow just doesn't get affected by it.
Yeah, it's a little bit in the version of you
To developer.
that it's basically
Well, right now, students
I've never.
don't really have like a whole lot of spirit here, but
basically it.
when it's for software.
I gotta remember my old
Sure.
stuff that was here.
Were you studying?
Were you in
Yeah, long, well, not long. I did 3.5 years up in the University of Illinois, so that's why I really get a lot of interest in that. I remember from
front-end dev
and I had
over at IBM.
discussion, talking about how to
How long have you been there?
That was a couple months now.
wow. I mean, and I
Down
really
from
have much
Colorado.
reason to use a lot of that one, unfortunately. But it's pretty cool. So my computer's collision with the student. Okay.
What year are you? Senior?
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, okay.
Oh, like not bad?
No, it's a little ovenized. It's like a zinger, but it also has a little oven circuit inside. Regular. That's the
Voltage
Yeah,
regulator.
that's the
Right,
voltage
the voltage
it's
regulator.
using, like basically every precision computer.
Avalanche reach, so, yeah, I carrier these are collisions with that's really interesting. I don't think I ever studied that, but I'd love to sit down and look at this. That looks pretty cool. But yeah, that would be pretty cool. But you need to get GPI protocol. But you know what it is, you just need to get it. I imagine actually the rates, if you're working with high precision post level settings, you're probably getting pretty higher rates than
Well, it's not a oscilloscope, it's just a multimeter. So it's almost like a later 10
but it's just very high precision. I guess, yeah, there's probably definitely interest.
So yeah, it's useful in a situation where you want to model something for like a day or whatever, you can see how it varies.
Yeah, I can definitely see. Fine, actually.
I can see you. Yes. I can hear you, but unfortunately I'm not going through the tables yet here, so I'm the only one that can hear you. 1 second.
Sounds very fun, but
I can kind of hear it.
challenging. You gotta redraw a lot of old specs. A lot of digging into it.
Right.
Some pretty hilarious instructional videos from the movies.
1 second.
That's always this
Logic reader. Like the 90s.
Tell you what, give me 1 second, I'm gonna grab the maybe she come on.
Yo, this guy is nasty. Special. Sweet. Straight up. That is wild.
As the rest of us.
This is an incredible piece of tech, honestly. I'm really impressed. Where do you find the multimeter? It's that one.
Just go on eBay and
Oh, you just got it.
you'll see all the good points, then you'll see all the old ones.
Didn't notice anything in particular, but
You did? Oh, the.
60s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, the 64. Yeah. It's like mad. Oh, man.
Took me a while longer.
I got lucky. Get lucky.
I don't do this, like,
Yeah.
brute force fest.
Brute force is good.
Just like the computer.
That's how it gets to work.
Yeah.
This guy's font doesn't insane this small.
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
You missed it, we're so.
That doesn't gotta hurt your eyes. I mean, that usually
Brute force. How do we get it? You do it quadrillion times a second, I think it kind of.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it can only go that fast, right?
Bro, you want some pizza?
So were you measuring
Am I
this?
making you a pizza?
I can say something.
Right, perfect.
You can hear me all right? Can you see the screen that I'm sharing?
No, I won't, I would not.
So that's okay.
Yes, it's like the desktop.
What kind of like, what are you like taking the numbers here? Okay.
Well, everybody's here for Node.js.
Are y'all just here?
I follow Hi. You're here for other guys. Very warm welcome to you all.
My first time to do much JavaScript.
I have no idea, to be honest, about that. Oh, yeah, you can totally sit over there. Yeah, yes, please, crush it, throw it on the ground.
Oh, yeah. That's about
There you go. Beats me.
Yeah,
No, yeah, it's a lot.
it's definitely the largest of one I'm okay.
Join us.
To get the hair out of the.
Yeah, exactly. It's on the Yeah, something
I
like
think your tests automatically fail if they can't.
Thicker sheet, that they used until about 1970.
Yeah, no, there's a whole lot of stuff they can't.
Living camera. So when you
This
keep
is
it up, but
I think it's a lot of.
I know.
I know.
I really think.
space exploration is nothing like I wish.
Nowadays, yeah.
Oh, so it's kind of like a abstraction on top of the rest. You know, well, like when you request a resource, like the URL or something, like send out all that stuff. So this is just kind of like making it a little more customizable. Yeah,
We need to spend more money.
it's performance wise.
Well, you've done like,
What's your name? Sorry.
Ash Project?
Ryan. Nice to meet you.
It was, I'm talking about it.
Are they
Oh, is that it?
They finally had a man that sounds space for.
You didn't really.
Oh, yeah.
I can know what that is, it's taken a year and a half.
You have to have an access.
We're on the same boat.
Nobody else was.
Are you Noah?
Oh, yes. I feel like I should go get that. Oh.
That's not put in the thing.
I'm used to that. Did you go to the,
Oh, yeah, okay. Well,
Am I changing? Myself on the way.
Self-taught route.
that sounds great.
Yeah, it's a long road.
Things on Mars and exploration.
And are we at chairs?
This is not it's basically
There's.
so he
It's
learned
depends
how
on
to
the
actually
function,
move on Mars.
You did a good job on it.
Yeah.
The guy actually learned how to be able to talk a lot of
Okay.
modern day.
That was a route I, yeah, did like a 6-month one in Colorado.
The Martian.
Moved down.
Andrew.
Oh, that's right, you were.
I think I was instructed at one time when I sort of.
But, yeah.
Decided that I really liked it.
Well, yeah, at least you know, it's such a crazy basis, like, you it's called Galvanize.
That's right.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Colorado change.
Pretty good.
And then is this one also true?
It's just like.
Or is it just like not big enough?
They know what they're doing.
I would prefer to be boring. If I get this program, I
I've gotten a lot of requests.
You can do both.
It's a balance.
That's what
We gotta finish up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like. Yeah.
Would you you know? That's the key to work out.
That sounds right.
I got out of those.
I am.
No, I ain't gonna take it. That's just not studying.
So it was just, you know, like a couple months, like 2-3 months.
No, seriously, we'll make it work.
Like, oh my god, I spent all this money and it's gonna tire me over.
Yeah, that's
Push
fine.
through it, comply.
Just don't throw it on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, we got screwed a little bit, but it's a same story.
Can you guys hear me? Is this mic up here working? Yes? No?
Nah.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Also in the second row.
Fair.
All right, I think I'm just gonna have to talk loud. So if you can't hear me, flag me down, tell me to speak up. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Here at Bleeding Edge Web. Sorry, we were normally in the other room, switched us at the last second here, so if anybody needs chairs, just talk to them at the front desk. He's looking in right now, actually. Okay, so a couple of quick things. We're at JTX on Twitter. The slides that we're going to be going through tonight, all of the slides, are up at edjtx.github.io/slides. If you just go to edjtx.github.io, there's links there, so you can follow along if you'd like. And we have a Slack channel. You can get an invite, edjtx-invite.herokuapp.com. There is a live channel in there. You're welcome to join us. Normally, Brian, primary organizer here, he's out tonight. So normally we have somebody manning that through both presentations. But you're going to have to just stick with me for Noah's talk through later. But feel free to join and sign up in there if you have questions or anything that you want to post about the meetup. feel free. Okay, so the formatting is slightly better than last month. All right, so agenda for tonight, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. I'll go over the news from the bleeding edge here, and then we'll dive right into Node and Arduino with Noah, and then we'll do some additional announcements at the end if there are any. Now, quick show of hands, who's new? First time to the meetup. Oh, wow, this is awesome. All right, welcome everybody. So the typical pattern here is that we'll do an intro kind of covering all the interesting things in the world of the web that have happened in the last month or so. And then we'll dive into a deeper talk. So that's kind of our normal format. For those of you that have been here before, we usually do announcements and stuff at the beginning, but due to the fact that they've been taking so long to get through, we're pushing those off to the end and letting sponsors here talk about things up front, use the initial time. So quick housekeeping stuff. If you park in this building, make sure you get your little parking ticket validated. It's $5 instead of 30. And if you do stick around afterwards, that clock starts over at midnight. So 12:01, you're going to get charged for it. Normally we will do Buffalo Billiards after the meetup, which is a couple blocks over on 6th and Brazos here. I am not going to be able to make it tonight due to some very tight deadlines. So while you guys are all enjoying a beer, I'll be coding. So that said, thanks to Capital Factory for the venue space every month. Really couldn't do this without them. And then our food and drinks, the pizza, which if you haven't already gotten any, it's back there. There is beer down, I think it got pushed underneath the table now, but you're welcome to that as well. And that's all courtesy of Flow Sports this month. And Noah, I believe you work with them, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if you guys have anything to say, you can, or you can speak out when you start talking. So, no?
We're a great company to work for. Lots of great people, and we're working right now on rewriting our application in Angular 4 with TypeScript and Angular Universal. So we're doing some bleeding edge stuff. So if anyone wants to, we're looking for people. So if anyone wants to talk about it, you can see me or my boss after the talk or whatever.
So a quick raise of hands. Who's looking for work right now? All right. So there you go. All right, cool. So make sure you talk to Flow Sports afterwards here. And then we also have an extra sponsor this month, Expedition Hacks. And I've got Eric here online. He's going to talk to you very quickly about a hackathon that's coming up here in Austin. That sounds pretty interesting. So give me just a second to get him on here.
Corey.
Hey, there we go. All right, we got you vocally.
Hey, so the speaker's working.
Yes, and now, all right, we've got your desktop here, but it's a little bit small, so just be forewarned of that. And I can bring up the slides if you want.
That might be good. I mean, I just pulled up the slides. If that's not big enough, go ahead and pull them up on your end. There's 3.
All right, I got them up here, so all right, take it away.
All right, thanks very much. And this will only take a few minutes, and then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Wanted to share with you that information that Corey just mentioned. There's a hackathon that we're helping sponsor at the end of July, and it's at Gather on North Lamar Road. It'll be 9 a.m., finishing up Sunday evening. There's a detailed schedule that's online that you can go check out. The purpose of this hackathon is to create the next generation of immersive experiences. And essentially what we're looking at is in about 15 years, at the end of the next decade, how can we use technology to predict, model, simulate conflict, how to mitigate it, how to prevent it. So this isn't about, the word conflict is there, so I need to address that this is not about promoting conflict or fighting, it's about preventing it and doing something about it, monitoring it, and figuring out how to deal with natural or other issues that would draw humanity into conflict with each other or with nature at some point in the relatively near future. Second slide. All right, so I want to mention that the primary sponsor for this hackathon is the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. They're very interested in some of the things that I'm going to talk about here very briefly about the kinds of ideas. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, and we really want people to come in and use their imagination for whatever it is that you can think of what things might be like down the road. What would space look like? Flying around, and or is there conflict? Can we go out there and explore? Is there too much space junk or too many space planes? Machine learning, AI, can those be used to look at social unrest, trends in climate, population increases, food, etc., and those causes on society, and what you can do there. Using games to teach people, and as I mentioned in italics, not just first-person shooters. That's certainly all about conflict, but that's not really what we're after. We're after teaching people and having them learn about the kinds of issues that they're going to deal with. Drones, satellites, augmented and virtual reality, dealing with pre- and post-conflict scenarios. So there's a lot of ideas here, but like I said, that there is by no means, these are just things that we came up with in a few minutes, and by no means exhaustive. So we'll go to the last slide.
Okay. Good to go.
All right, and then the practical parts of the hackathon. It's a $5,000 prize for the winner. As I mentioned, NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. It's got to be 3 letters, or it's not a real agency. It's the sponsor. They're going to be with the capability of giving people contingent offers on the spot. So they're definitely looking for people with imagination and good ideas, great approaches for some of these problems. And to make sure that everybody knows anything that you create or is going to remain your intellectual property. There's a couple of links here. Like I said, there's a lot more information online. You can go check out past hackathons. This is, I think, the 8th or 9th that we've done. This is the time we've been in Austin. The last one was in Seattle. That went over very well. And let us know. You can go to the meetup group. There's an Expedition Hacks Austin meetup group, and I'm open to any questions that anybody might have.
Anybody have questions? Okay, it doesn't look like it. Looks like that was pretty comprehensive. So, so thank you. And Eric, can you get these? Can you maybe post these on the meetup site for anybody or these slides for anybody that would be interested?
Absolutely. Would you be able to also send them out? I can do both.
Probably. Yeah. Let's talk to Brian. We do have a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
My name is Victor. The question is about hackathon. Is it roughly like a majority of it like storyboarding and minority about it coding, or is it flipped around?
Did you catch that?
I think so. So and some more of this information, by the way, is online about what you can expect, but it is about creating storyboards, creating a scenario of what you think a solution would look like, and then piecing it together in a storyboard that you can demonstrate at the end of the second day. Of course, we don't expect a complete system. It's a hackathon. It's about coming up with a proof of concept. So it's being able to tell a story about what it is that you want to be able to create and the approach that you would take to do it. And by the way, some of that information, it comes with food and drinks, lots of caffeine for everybody who would show up, so everybody will be well fed and caffeinated. You don't have to stay there though. There's 2 parts of the event where people who are participating have to show up. Once at the beginning, so that you can make sure that all the teams are known, because they're going to everybody teams of 5 people, and then at the end when the teams have to present their solutions. But the teams can go anywhere they want. in the middle, throughout the night, wherever you want to go. But there'll be room and food and, like I said, drinks, caffeinated drinks for anybody who wants to stick around.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Eric. And we'll make sure that if any of this is interesting to you, that you can get it online.
Great, I'll get it posted. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right, so for anybody that's not familiar, that's not a normal kind of situation. We don't usually have people calling in, but he wanted to discuss that. I believe that the same hackathon occurred in San Antonio last month, so I don't know if there's anything recurring here, but you can always follow up if you have questions. So that said, let's get to the news from the bleeding edge. We usually start off with this browser update. Our last check was last month, May 24th, and you can see here on the screen the where each browser was at version-wise as of last month. This month we've seen there have been a couple of changes. We're at Chrome 59, Firefox 54, and Edge is at 16.2.15 now. That's the stable release, not the fast release. And for anybody that's unfamiliar, Edge is tied to the version or the versioning of Windows. So we're technically at like Edge 15, the easier to remember version number, but the rest of it ties to a build number of Windows. So there are actually 4 different versions that you can see: Fast Track, Stable Branch, a couple of other things like that. We try to track on the Stable Branch here. And then Safari didn't really have changes. Technically it went to 10.1.1, but the changes were minor enough that we're not going to cover them. So within Chrome 59, some interesting things. Animated PNG support. I actually hadn't dealt with this. Has anybody else tried to work with this in here? No? Okay, so you can do animated PNGs now within Chrome. Who knew? Streams API. Anybody a Node developer in here? Okay, wow, very few compared to normal. If you're used to streams in Node, piping and read streams, write streams, you can actually do that now in Chrome. This was in beta in Chrome 58, exists now, landed in 59. So some kind of interesting stuff going on there. Seeing the browser starting to react a lot more like backend technology to a degree. You can also run Chrome in headless mode now. So if you're used to something like Phantom.js or something along those lines, you can actually do the same type of thing with Chrome now, which is interesting, especially from like a CI/CD perspective if you're doing testing. Native notifications technically landed, and there is a link here for this. We discussed this last month. What this means is instead of seeing Chrome browser notifications now, at least on Mac, and that's the key, this is only on Mac OS, now you'll actually see a native notification window. I mentioned this last month. That actually has larger ramifications than just the browser, because if you happen to be an Electron developer, NWJS, something like that, this will affect you in that manner. So this is kind of a notable change for Chrome 59. And then the image capture API. This will allow you to do a fair amount with devices, so phones and webcams, that type of stuff. There's an awful lot around this particular API, so I'm not going to dive into it, but if that's something in your wheelhouse, check out the link here. So the more interesting stuff in Chrome, in my opinion, this month was primarily in the dev tools. And some of this stuff has actually existed for a little while, but it really came on my radar this month. An interesting one in particular is code coverage here. So there's CSS and JavaScript code coverage, and if you can see the screenshot, it basically shows you the total amount of each individual file in bytes. It will also show you how much of it is actually unused. So in this particular screenshot, you can see the red here is what's unused, the green is used. I believe that's what it is. So there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get used in the execution cycles of your page. And I will touch on this again in a couple of slides, but this is something that I believe this is a first. I don't think the other browsers have anything like this released yet. There's also screenshots, so full page screenshots, and this is just a quick animation. So it's going into DevTools, clicking on the icon just to see the page, and then you can go to capture full image. And what you'll notice is it'll download the PNG file, and there's the entire page. It's, of course, tiny. Zoom in just a second. So you can capture your whole page in a single click, basically, out of DevTools now. And then blocking. Request blocking in particular. This is another new feature in DevTools. In a nutshell, what this means is you can pretend like a request failed or didn't exist in your page. So you can do anything from error testing, network testing, that type of stuff, to get more used to error handling in your application, so that when something does go wrong, you can actually handle it without having to make your server actually fail or something of that nature. So this could end up being a very useful tool, especially if you're a single page app developer. So that's kind of the cool stuff. That the more notable stuff. There's a couple of other things with await and sync, or await and sync. So if you are using ES 2015, ES 2017, it might be worth checking out if you're already using those features and functions. In Firefox 54, there were really only two notable things. The date.utc now actually conforms to the ES 2017 spec. Now, to take a quick step back, most people are kind of on ES5 or ES6. That's ECMAScript. It's JavaScript, basically. We've been, over the last couple of years, we've been tracking the changes to ES 2015, which is the new spec. You see things like classes and a lot of things that you never saw, like fat arrows, things that JavaScript never had before. And a lot of people still need to use things like Babel or Webpack or those types of things to compile their code to work on older browsers. So the ES 2015 spec is what we've been focusing on. It's pretty well implemented in most browsers at this point in time. And so now we're starting to take a look at the 2017 spec, which is still evolving and still changing. So it's interesting to see Firefox with this particular change here. The other interesting and notable change is WebRTC's TCP ICE candidate support is now enabled by default. What that means, WebRTC is it's basically a peer-to-peer connection that you can create. So if anybody's familiar with like Socket.io, WebSockets in general, that uses more of a hub and spoke architecture where everything, it has bidirectional communication with a server, but everything funnels through the server. WebRTC will let you spread out. You have to connect to the server in order to identify who your peers are, and then you talk directly to your peers. That's what this is essentially allowing you to do in Firefox. So this has been an evolving standard for quite some time now, but this is a big deal in the evolution of WebRTC. Chrome already has this, and I believe that Safari, I think, may have this. No, I'm sorry, not Safari. I think Edge has this as well. So if you do use WebRTC, or if you're interested in real-time apps, this is something that will be, you can see a lot more of this stuff in use. As far as DevTools with Firefox, they now include an interesting feature with the data transfer size. So if you're doing a request against the server, it'll actually show you how much data payload size is returned. So simple but useful new feature there. Microsoft Edge. Well, I know not a lot of you were out here the last couple of months, but there are a couple of new events, the once and the passive event. So if you're a JavaScript developer and you're listening for events on the DOM, you can, usually the method for that is add event listen. Or if you're a Node person, you see something .on, like the event emitter.on. Node really brought forward this concept of having a one-time event handler. So you can listen for an event in your system, and then that's it, nothing else beyond that. So it's a way to listen and discard. That's now available in the web. Chrome brought this in last month. Edge now has this as well. So that's kind of an interesting feature if you're doing event-driven development of any kind. And then position sticky, a CSS attribute, is now supported, something that's been a long time in the making. And yes, the ES 2017 shared memory and atomic support. Yeah, who's heard of this? Yeah, I hadn't either. Yeah, Yeah, so basically, this came out in Chrome last month, but this is shared memory. Will think of it, I don't know how to say this other than think JavaScript with hyper-threading. That's basically what you can do with this in a nutshell. There's a lot of detail, but this stuff is pretty hardcore, and it's not so important to really understand this because most people aren't really going to be using this in their day-to-day development. But it is something interesting to note because the primary reason that this really came around was so that JavaScript can be used as a target for compiling other languages to JavaScript. So if you're familiar with something like ASM, being able to compile C or C++ to JavaScript, this helps enable that process. So you may start seeing a lot more languages that can compile to JavaScript thanks to these types of features that will be continuing to come out. So in the world of libraries, tools, and frameworks, done some interesting things. So V8, the JavaScript engine under Chrome, and also primarily the workhorse behind Node, now supports rest and spread properties on objects, not just on functions. So V8 6.0 has come out, and I don't remember if this is in the new versions of Node yet or not. Speaking of Node, though, the N API for Node, this is experimental and this is interesting. Back at Node Interactive last year, late last year, there was a whole lot of talk around this particular API because those that know Node know that it's based on V8. But the N API will allow you to leverage basically any JavaScript engine. And this has really been pushed by Microsoft. You'll see a lot of new Chakra Core releases, which is the JavaScript engine underneath Edge. So this API really kind of opens yet another door for the world of Node, as well as the ability to kind of tie into the more browsers. So it could be very interesting to see what this API enables developers to do, toolmakers to do, that type of stuff. NPM 5 was released. This really came along with Node 8. That was released mid-month last month, I think. Anyhow, there's a couple of interesting new features, kind of a couple of things based off of Yarn, so if anybody is familiar with that, you'll start to see some similarities there. ESLint v4 came out, so if you're using that for your linting, that's available now. And just kind of more, this hasn't landed, of course, but as a heads up, Angular 5's due date is September 19th. So we've seen Angular 4 fairly recently. Angular 5 is planning to ship, based on my quick skim of things, which I didn't have a lot of time, it doesn't look like there's going to be any breaking changes this time. So hopefully anybody that's using Angular will have a smoother upgrade path to Angular 5. And in case you missed it, just some kind of interesting things that I've picked up over the last month. I know I've talked a lot about Node for a web-oriented thing, but Node reached approximately 8 million users this month. What's unique about that is larger than Stack Overflow's user base. That's also just slightly less than half of GitHub's user base. So Stack Overflow has about 7 million users, GitHub has about 20 million users. There's 8 million Node developers out there. So when you think about what percentage of people are using Node, regardless of the other technologies they use, it's clearly growing. And this really came from an article about how Node could potentially overtake Java within the next year. So I don't know how true that is. That came from Michael Rogers, who is the exiting head of the Node Foundation. So these numbers are all kind of loose. The best that you can really do is estimate based on downloads and certain usage statistics. So that was something I found kind of interesting. Not necessarily the number of users, but the percentages and how many people are using Node. And for anybody that's unfamiliar, the Node ecosystem is really kind of circles around NPM, the package manager, which is the largest package manager in the world right now. And over 80% of that is UI-based tooling. So there is an awful lot going into tooling from the Node perspective for UI developers. So if you're developing web apps and just kind of consider yourself a UI person and aren't dealing with Node, you're gonna. It's gonna happen. So that's interesting points. Another point here, this project Fusebox, a faster, simpler Webpack alternative. Honestly, I didn't even look at the project because I don't really care. What interested me here is the name Fusebox. So I used to, back a long time ago, I used to be a Cold Fusion developer, and a very popular framework called Fusebox was around. The point is that we have cycled through so many names now, and we have so many projects out in the web community that we're starting to reuse names now at this point. And this isn't the first case, it just happened to be the one that I'm picking on for the evening. This other interesting project here, a spreadsheet in 25 lines of code. Hopefully the connection will work here. Now, if you can see this, all right, it's pretty grayed out. You might not be able to see this in the back, but there's this kind of really simplistic spreadsheet-like grid here. You can type stuff in, has a couple of keys. I'm just tabbing across here. And it's literally only about 25 lines of code, or JavaScript code, which, yeah, that doesn't really help make it any more visible. I'm sorry. The point that I want to make with this is not that there's a little spreadsheet utility here, but 25 lines of code to do something like this. When you look at a lot of the libraries that are out there these days, there is so much code. The point being that we've gotten to this point in our lives as developers that there's so much bloat and so much over-engineering in things that can be greatly simplified that we often skip right over this kind of stuff. So I really just wanted to make that point that there are tools, there are things you can do. It may sound like, oh my God, a spreadsheet. I got to make a spreadsheet on the web now. Isn't that what Google Sheets is for? But if you do need to do something like that, it might not be as complex to do on your own as it sounds. So don't be intimidated by projects is really kind of the key point here. And then this second to last point, so going back to the CSS coverage with dev tools, 70% of CSS is repetitive. Now this is based on a study of, I think it was 1,600 developers approximately, just looking through their code, and that's a lot of repetition, right? 70% is an awful lot. So it kind of illustrates the point that, for one, we're including a lot of libraries in our code, we're including a lot of stuff that really isn't necessary. And with tooling coming out to support these types of things, this very well could be kind of the next frontier as far as handling code, making it more usable, understandable, making it more performant in many cases. There's been a lot of talk of CSS engines being exposed, kind of the way that JavaScript has been exposed for so many years. So again, just a point of food for thought here, really more than anything. And then the final point actually off of the similar survey is the use of Bootstrap and Foundation has started to see a slight decline. That doesn't mean that it's not growing, it just means that the growth rate has reduced a little bit. That's not really pointing anything out, it's just kind of more a signal of the fact that there are so many other things out there these days that we're starting to see just a lot of variety. Which if you haven't already, I think I'm really preaching to the choir, because if you haven't already had JavaScript fatigue, you will. Final bit on perspective here. This is a chart of parse times for 1 megabyte of JavaScript. Now this came out of the Fluent conference, and the very top one here is a MacBook Pro running Safari 10, followed by an iPhone 7, followed by a MacBook Pro running Chrome 55, and then you get on down into a whole bunch of different things, with the very last device at the bottom being an Asus T00J Zenfone. That's the point is that 1 megabyte, a lot of page sizes these days are actually reaching that point. That's a lot when you think about what's being passed on every request, and even what you're expecting users to cache in their browsers, especially if you're writing mobile apps or something of that nature. So this is just kind of a nice reminder that there are a lot of different devices out there, and your applications will perform differently. So if you think you could just throw in another library, after 10, 15, 20 of those, it's time to maybe scale those back and think again, so that you're not another one of those that has 70% CSS repetition.
Is that in microseconds? I'm trying to read this.
Yeah.
Here's on the x-axis.
That is a great question. I don't actually know. This was an image I pulled off of Twitter, and I forgot to pull down
That's fair.
the bottom metrics there. But
I will check this Twitter name.
there you go.
He's good at graphs.
All right, so a couple of upcoming events here in town. Angel Hack 2017. This is an annual thing. If you're interested, it's going to be July 8th and 9th at Galvanize down the street. You can get in for free using our code here, free for BEW. Again, these slides are all online, so check that out if you like. It's usually a pretty decent event. Mobility X is a pitch competition for any entrepreneurs in here, focusing on artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision, augmented and virtual reality, those types of things. I believe it's actually here, at Capital Factory. There's prizes, 10 grand to the winner, 5 grand, 2,500, so forth. The important thing is, if this is something of interest to you, the application deadline is coming up really, really soon on the 30th. And of course, you can get the details at this link if you'd like. And that's all I've got, so apologize for taking so much time, but we'll take a very quick break, get Noah up here, talk about Node and Arduino.
Do you know if there are access tokens?
I'm sorry?
Access tokens?
For the room?
Yeah, I guess website.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Oh, no.
Hold on. I'll give you the,
You know what I mean? It's like,
This kind of.
I'm on Mac.
there is a plan for that.
So the scary thing is they say they're going to try to learn how.
I'll just use the, I guess,
Yeah, there is.
That would really that would be really bizarre, because they say they work with pilots and has JavaScript. So it's like back in the day, you had
Is it still the guest network? Is it still on the guest network?
It should be on the regular.
when they were talking about
I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. I figured it just.
It's just the regular network. So if that
And all lowercase. Yeah.
I'm gonna go out and grab the guy too.
I walked past you 5 different times, and I was like, oh, I thought he was
You know what I mean?
he's not getting that. Oh, no, I was looking. I'm not anti-football. I like that.
Does anybody else need a Wi-Fi code? There were.
yeah. Whoever's tethering off me, take that number.
And there are more of these at the front desk. So how many more? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
One time there was. We actually do need C code.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, that's.
C friendly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, honestly, there's an incredible amount
But to think that they managed, well, they couldn't actually land on the moon without the alarm sounds.
At the very end. We're doing the training.
Because they were gonna land it.
I'm not. Yeah.
I mean, incredible. And they say you, a bunch of guys found the term blue or something.
It's gotta be intense though. Man, that's
Looks like I go to S's version.
The Armstrong was cool.
Go ahead. Okay. We're gonna start. My name's Noah. I'm a PHP developer, but I also mess around with Node.js and the Arduino, and this is just a fun introduction to get you going. We're just gonna have a lot of fun learning about Node.js and the Arduino. So the first thing we're gonna go over is what is an Arduino. So an Arduino is a small microcontroller. It's just a cheap real-time computer. And it's got pins, so that's an important point. And you can basically tell the pin whether it's an input pin or an output pin. Input pin means that it can read from it, so it can send something. Output pin means that it can output something, so like turn on an LED. So it'll send electricity through it. And they're numbered like 0 through 13. It's got ground, volt. And it's just a cheap, like real-time computer, so it doesn't have an OS on it. So a good example or good use case for the Arduino would be a pinball machine. Hit the bumper, add a point. So just a really simple computer, and they cost like $6 on eBay. Don't quote me on that. And this is how it traditionally works. There's two functions in traditional Arduino code, and it's usually written in C, or a dialect of C called protocol if you want to be technical, so don't discount points for that. But first function is called a setup function, and that runs once. And then the loop function runs over and over again. And you can kind of look at this like an event loop in JavaScript. So you'll put a bunch of if statements. So if the button's pressed down, go do something. And we'll see that on the next slide. So that's kind of what you're writing. So if something happens, go do X. And it's just constantly running over and over again. So this is just kind of an example. So if the button is high, and high means it's a constant, that means that the button's on. Go ahead and turn pin 9 on, or turn this LED on. Otherwise, turn it off. So this is traditionally how you'd write it. And JavaScript's kind of interesting. So JavaScript has this concept of an event loop built in. And what's also interesting about JavaScript as far as Node goes, that I noticed, is that it's non-blocking. So it has non-blocking I/O. So that means, for those that aren't into Node as much, you can basically make a database call, and while it's waiting on the database call, it can go do something else. So it doesn't like stop and wait. So like PHP and other languages have blocking I/O. So it has to wait for the database call to come back and then do something. So you can kind of look at this as like a database in a way when you're writing Node Arduino code. So it can like tell the Node code to do something. It doesn't have to wait on the Arduino. And then this is another thing that got me when I started, because I come from the PHP world, and this is kind of cool, is that the Node server saves save state. It's not like session or anything. So like you can make a request and add 1 to the counter, and you'll make another request, and that counter variable will be 2. So Node servers save states. If you were doing this in PHP, you would always get back 1. So that's just an interesting point with Node.js, and we actually use the fact that it saves state in one of the examples. So putting it all together, your Node code is not actually going to run on the Arduino. What's going to happen is the Arduinos that we have some firmware loaded on it. You can find this in the Arduino IDE under Examples, Standard for MATA. And it's loaded on there, and then through USB. Oftentimes it's called serial port, but what they mean is USB. So through the USB cable, the node server will communicate to the Arduino and tell it what to do. So that's how it works. And the library that we're going to be using is Johnny 5. And I really like Johnny 5. Works with a ton of modules, a ton of like sensors outside of the Arduino world. And what's also cool about this is that you're not just stuck to the Arduino. You can also write code for the Raspberry Pi, BeagleBone, a whole slew of microcontrollers. So you're not just tied to the Arduino, but it is kind of nice. And that's the other thing I wanted to mention too, is that don't just think like you need a laptop to run this. You can have your node server on like a Raspberry Pi or something, and then that can communicate and be the brains to tell the Arduino what to do. So you're not just tied to laptops only. So that's a really good library. And this is just the Hello World Johnny 5. Basically when the board is ready, so if you don't specify the port or the serial port, so like COM3, it'll just find it for you. So when the board is ready, turn on blink LED 13. And 13 is the, on the Arduino, it is the built-in LED. So this will work even if you don't have an LED. And you can program like this where it's like a set of instructions, so do this, do that, do this. Or you can program functionally where, we'll see that later, like on button click or on button, go execute some code. So you can take advantage of both worlds. And that is really, really nice, because otherwise you'd be writing if statements and other things. So you get to take advantage of some of that event loop stuff. And this is just a crash course on Node.js. I'm not a Node.js expert, but I really like it. I think it's a lot of fun, especially to mess with. So Node.js, this declares the server. With Express, that's what we're using for the routing. Basically, you can do .get, and that's a GET request to the root, and then this will just send some JSON. And you have a request object and a response object. And it's listening on port 3000. So you go to localhost 3000, and that's where you'd see the server. And we're also going to be using Socket.io. So you can go the other way too. So it doesn't just have to be the node server getting a request from the web page and then telling the Arduino what to do. You can also, the Arduino can say, hey, a button was pressed, send that to the node server, and then the node server via socket can send that to the web browser. So you can go both ways. We use Socket.io to do that in this class, and it's still pretty much an event-based system. So this will emit an event every 2 seconds, and this will just be logged out to the console. So everything's event-based, which is cool. And that's just something else. Everything in Arduino is also event-based. So like you button clicks, like when you're building a robot, like, oh, I'm like 5 meters away from point X, I need to turn, sort of thing, or 5 centimeters. The other project we're going to be doing is going the other way, so from the web page. So this will make a AJAX request to the node server. The node server will then send that to the Arduino to turn on or off the light. And we'll do a fade in and fade out. And this is something that Johnny 5 does really well that would take a crap ton of C code to do, is it can do like a fade in and a fade out using the pulse width modulation pins. So it'll create like a little fade, and you'll kind of see that. If you were doing that like in normal C, like that would be like a lot of code. But you can just, with one line of code, you can just do it with Johnny 5. And this is the example, that project. This is the Node.js. So we wait for the board to be ready. And notice that we're saving this LED pin. So this means that it's on or off. So every time, basically every time that this endpoint is hit, this blink LED, which is what makes the AJAX call, we toggle this on and off, and we fade in and out the LED. So you'll hook up the LED to pin 9, and it'll just fade in and out based on the web request. So it's just simply turning it on and off, and this is taking advantage of the fact that Node saves state. And we're waiting for, another thing to mention too is that we're not just turning on the server, we're waiting for the board to be ready. So you can wrap everything, you can make sure the board's ready before the server turns on. And you'll also notice like in your command line, like it'll say, hey, the board's ready. So you'll be able to see like when to go to the page. And then this is the JavaScript code. It's really simple jQuery. So like so it'll just turn it on. It'll just make the web request. It'll change the HTML, and just does some simple Bootstrap class stuff. Nothing too fancy there. This is the Photobooth example. So this is going the other way. So basically, what's going to happen here is you're going to push this really big fun button. And then that's going to send a message to the Arduino, to the node server. Then via socket, it will take a picture of you, if you allow it to. If you allow the code I wrote to take a picture of you. And I'm not like, there's nothing funky in the code, so don't worry. So this uses socket IO, and this uses port 1800 for the sockets. One important thing to note with this code, right up front, is that this is using the pull-up resistor. So I'm not going to explain what a pull-up resistor is because I'm really bad at explaining what pull-up resistors are. But what it does is it takes out all the noise. So like a lot of times with buttons and whatnot, there's a lot of noise. It's constantly like flashing on and off. This puts like a 10K ohm resistor and takes out all the noise. So you'll get like a true button click. So that's kind of cool that it does that. So basically we make sure it's connected. And then once it's up, so once you press the button, once you let go, it'll send, basically it'll emit a take picture event, and then the web browser will respond to that. And we're just using simple HTML for the page. And yeah, we just connect it like so. So we set up the media device. This is just some code I copied and pasted. Basically takes the picture, but this is the interesting part. Once it's socket.on, once it receives this event from the server, from the socket, it takes the picture. So that's the main thing, like 52 through 54. So we'll be able to go the other way. So you can go both ways. So with this, you can have the web page control the Arduino, or you can have the Arduino control the web page. And you can do both at the same time. This is some cool, fun projects I'm going to be setting up. This is using LED matrix, and if you were doing this in C code, you'd have to know binary, and you'd have to do some bit shifting, which is really scary. But this allows you just to use a simple function to control an LED matrix, and you basically click on these squares, and it sends a little thing up to the node server, turn it on and off. So if you don't know binary, you can still do stuff like this. And binary is not as scary as it sounds. This is another fun thing going the other way. So this is we'll set this project up too. This is a Sonar Sensor. And basically what this does is it live streams the distance data through a little thing. So you can see, you'll be able to see, like right now it's just constant 0, but you'd be able to see like you're going up and down. Say I had like a bottle, and this just uses a sonar sensor. So sonar just goes to the object and it bounces back, and basically the time that the echo pin is high on the sonar sensor is what it uses to determine the distance, and it does some math for that. But all that's encapsulated from you. It's kind of cool. And just before we get started, just some basics on breadboard. So breadboards are a cheap way of prototyping. So, and these are the breadboards that you're going to use, so you don't have to solder stuff. So they're connected from here to here. So if I put a wire on J30 and F30, they're going to be connected. So they're connected vertically like this, and then down here they're connected horizontally. So the ones on the bottom are connected horizontally. The other thing to note is with these LEDs, the long side is the positive side. And basically in the 1800s, people got it wrong. They thought electricity flowed from positive to negative. Turns out it's not. So the positive side is where the electricity goes. This got me confused for a long time. So basically you're going to hook up the volts to the positive side and then ground to the negative, I think. Okay. Anyway, if it doesn't work, the cool thing about Arduino is that I've blown a lot of stuff up. I've fried a lot of chips. You're not messing with enough electricity to do any real damage. So you're not going to blow anything up here, which is kind of cool.
Aww.
But We do that sometimes.
We can
So,
do that.
We can do that. We can pop some capacitors. But I want to thank Bleeding Edge for hosting this. Before we get to the project, I want to thank Socket.io and Express and Johnny Five. Without those guys, they put in a lot of work, and believe me, this is a lot of work to build all that. Way more work than I put in. And so kudos to them. And I want to thank my company for sponsoring this, Flow Sports. So what we're going to do is I've got some kits and you guys are going to have to share. But if you go to the meetup page, there's 2 workbooks, and depending on which kit you get, and I'm just going to give them out randomly, you'll work through the project. And I have all the firmware installed, so you won't have to install any firmware. The only thing you'll have to have is Node.js on your computer. So I'm just going to give it out one per table.
You said it's Fermata?
Standard Fermata.
Standard Fermata? That's just in the libs, right?
Yes, it should just be in the examples.
Okay.
And I can show you guys where that is. So just let you guys share, and then
Oh, no. No, I think it's.
Total side note, we haven't had anything like this before. Oh, cool. To have the hands-on aspect, so.
Oh, I didn't.
Haven't done this.
No, it is easy. Got questions on the Arduino side. I don't know anything about Node.js, but I love to hear it.
Just looks so much easier.
I'm sure.
Okay, so if you have the one with the LED, it's the LED one. But
That's the developer lifestyle.
let me know if anyone has any questions. We're here for you.
And then the other.
Yeah, I mean, I just got
I know this because she was. It's also.
The project. Oh yeah, that's important. The project instructions are on the link on the meetup page.
On the meetup
Right, I have Node.js.
Oh, yeah.
Right out of the garage.
We'll see.
Yeah, I'm downloaded, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I do a lot of things. Yeah, that's
Better than what I got, I'll
Do you have like
I definitely have problems with things. I'm sure.
Do it as you do it.
Yeah.
Do it.
as you develop more and more, you will get nicer and nicer like file system.
That's what I was when you're starting out.
That's probably my mistake. That's why I put this guy. How many have to see one?
I mean, I know it means approximately, but I don't think
That's
that's.
it. This is approximately 11.
Oh, really?
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
I don't want to write it all. Yeah, it's just like
It doesn't make sense to me. Alright, so now the next thing is, the wire. The wire is pin 9, it's pin 38. Pin 9, that goes into 38, 30A. Pin 9 on the Arduino. And now the other wire goes into the ground. This is the wrong, wait a minute, is there a 10 that sticks out that's ground on it?
yeah, this is our project. Just like ours.
Yeah, we're gonna need it.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, so back to
Trim it up a little bit.
yeah. I don't know if it'll let us like grab a repository.
ground.
That's what so that's like that's what allows you to push that. This is what's that's just the way. Listen, so it does the that's the socket is to push stuff to the web browser. So like when you're
I got a question. I have no
hit the button, and that's going to send a message to the web servers, and then you're going to push that data to the web browser. And the web browser is going to
It might not.
Yes.
Like macOS, based off
Yeah, just, you had the button one, or the LED one, I had the wrong repository. That's my fault. So I pushed pasted in the right repository.
Wait, which one?
You had the button one.
Oh, thank gosh, I was like,
No, that's, so it should just be no LED. Oh yeah, let me,
change it on this.
change it up and move that. With Johnny 5. I think so. It's required.
There's so much stuff we need, like NPM.
Did NPM install not work? Yeah, that's good. Oh, are you the
like becoming a developer, like I can't do this. When we're done, I want you to delete everything.
How are we just banging
I put it, I updated because we're going to install, right?
Engineer turned on.
Nice.
Second you So Node-RED, how different is it? Loaded that. So I took the I know it's more base. Node register in the bottom.
Yeah, I've never used it, that's a really,
I guess I should pay more attention to what it's saying.
there's a lot of nodes. There's a wealth of nodes.
What do we type? Just basically install node into the folder so that we can.
Just go down, go to nodes, if you have nodes,
We definitely have nodes. We have get this project started during this whole.
so you want to
So we want to clone the repository. Do you have
oh, sweet. Do you
It's like an and then we type out our like but so in this case, so we're going to do CD documents, but in case we're not going to get away with this. So what you have here right now is this.
Well, it is good.
On Linux, it's actually backscale. It's like power supply, one thing we could do is rename it to just that's pretty like standard.
Yeah, well, that makes you 2,000. Yeah, exactly.
First step we need to do is put alongside take a. Yeah, I usually just. Okay, so we got that. Then it says hook the other wire into ground on the Arduino. And 27A sitting on the here's the rotor. Grounders on the other side.
This is this.
There's ground on the yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, now, not convenient. It says it's setting up an unknown device.
So, next time,
Oops, wrong side, wrong side.
It seems like it's right there. Right, does anybody else see that?
They work by different names. Right, so we made it. So, that's another project. Challenge, make it crash based on
Expanding horizons. This is new for me.
Okay, so this is it. You can use on, use it all. So we have to have a count for the number of times that they press. So this. This I think is the button. So. So now what we're supposed to do, make it flash based on the number of
So it's basically like I can take my project and like say this is where it's going. And I can like keep working on it and get it in as okay, I want to like branch off and like try some experiments on this project. Stuff like that. I can create all that and just go back to one or you know, if I'm like working on the same branch and I have things else, I go back and
Yeah.
if it's on, it's going to phase actually. Every time you get a code, it'll be here. And right now, it either turns it on or turns it off.
Yeah, the question would be,
So I think
years ago, maybe all the
No, and that failed.
The good thing is
it's on. Okay, so this thing controls what it's doing. So you're saying to do this. So let's
really easy to get.
like that. better than it would be. Switch languages.
Tricky onto this, and then you can
Yeah, actually, a project with no cost.
What is that?
Oh.
Yeah.
So this goes through this package JSON file, and it finds all the dependencies that the files are on. Link me like software, all that stuff. It's on, and grabs those files, like, because like a week long now, it's just like code with these things. This is a I don't think this is the same one.
it's a zero, then it's a solid. Yeah, we should have because they just started with okay. It's not faded out. Okay.
Okay, so hopefully our Arduino goes
I think they started Oh, this happens to die. Oh, then someone better than it.
I got talking about basically what you do is I could like store what I did when I'm a one session Changes in our
Yeah.